March 10, 2015 was supposed to be just another milestone on the road to happily ever after. For Danielle Morgan, a 28-year-old elementary school teacher from Savannah, Georgia, it was 5 days before she would walk down the aisle to marry Marcus Taylor, the man she had loved for nearly 4 years. A modest ceremony, handcrafted with care, was set to take place beneath the Spanish moss of Forsyth Park. The dress was fitted, the rings were chosen, the honeymoon was booked, everything was in place, except, as it turned out, Danielle. That night, surrounded by her closest friends in a small, warmly lit bar on Montgomery Street, Danielle laughed, toasted, and danced to the soft hum of a jazz quartet. By all accounts, she was radiant. She sipped slowly on a glass of wine, careful not to drink too much, smiled when people spoke, and touched the small gold necklace Marcus had given her on their 2nd anniversary. Her friends, Tasha, Kenya, and Faith, noticed she was a little quieter than usual, but no one pressed. Danielle had always been the introspective one, a thinker, a dreamer. She didn't need to talk much to be felt in a room. Around 12:30 a.m., the group decided to call it a night and headed back to Tasha's apartment just a few blocks away. Tasha, her closest friend since college, had insisted on one last sleepover, just like the old days. Matching pajamas, face masks, and a movie they'd probably fall asleep halfway through. Danielle had agreed with a soft laugh. "Just don't make me cry," she'd joked. "I've already done my makeup trial for tomorrow's rehearsal dinner." Inside the apartment, the women settled into their usual rhythms. Kenya started making popcorn. Faith picked out a movie. Tasha lit a lavender candle and brought out old photos from their time at Spelman College. The room buzzed with warmth and memory, the kind of familiarity that wraps around you like a favorite sweater. At 1:45 a.m., Danielle excused herself to use the bathroom. "Don't fall asleep on me," she called over her shoulder. That was the last thing anyone ever heard her say. 15 minutes passed, then 20. At first, no one noticed, but when the end credits rolled and Danielle still hadn't returned, Tasha knocked on the bathroom door. No answer. She called again, louder this time. Still silence. The door was unlocked. When she slowly pushed it open, she found the bathroom empty. The overhead light was still on. The faucet had a faint drip. Danielle's overnight bag sat neatly on the counter. But the window, a small sliding panel above the bathtub, was open. And Danielle was gone. No phone, no wallet, no goodbye, just gone. Savannah police arrived within the hour. They searched the apartment thoroughly, no signs of forced entry. The main door remained locked from the inside. There was no sign of struggle, no scuff marks, no hair strands, no fabric threads, no fingerprints out of place. The only anomaly was that window, barely large enough for an adult to squeeze through, but technically possible. A narrow fire escape led down to the alleyway. No cameras, no witnesses, no explanation. The next morning, Marcus was awakened by a call he could never have anticipated. His fiancée was missing. In the first few hours, he clung to the hope that it was a misunderstanding, a mix-up. Maybe she'd gotten anxious, gone for a walk, lost her phone. Maybe she just needed air. But by the second day, hope turned to panic. And by the third, the word abandoned began creeping into conversations he didn't want to hear. But Marcus refused to believe it. Danielle wasn't the type to run. She was steady, thoughtful, compassionate to a fault. She sent thank you cards for every gesture. She always remembered birthdays. She still called her mother every Sunday after church. "If Danielle left," Marcus said softly into a reporter's microphone on day 5, "then she left because something pushed her to a place none of us saw coming." The city responded. Volunteers canvassed the neighborhood. Flyers flooded local cafes, bus stops, and churches. News stations ran segments titled "The Vanishing of a Southern Bride." And yet there were no security tapes, no credit card activity, no cell phone signal. Danielle Morgan had simply slipped through the cracks of her own life. The question was how, and more hauntingly why. For those who knew her, it felt like the world had tilted. Danielle had been a woman of intention, not impulse. She loved her students. She doted on her mother. She adored Marcus. Nothing in her recent past had hinted at unrest. No fights, no financial stress, no family drama. But silence is sometimes more dangerous than rage, and perfection, if held too long, can become a mask that suffocates. Tasha recalled a moment just a week before the disappearance, when Danielle had stared too long out of a coffee shop window. "Do you ever feel like you're living the life everyone expects you to, instead of the one you actually want?" she had murmured. Tasha thought it was a passing mood. Now she wasn't so sure. Police found one disturbing clue during their investigation. Danielle had withdrawn $10,000 in cash from a joint savings account 3 days before the bachelorette party. She'd also deleted her internet search history and turned off location sharing on her phone. None of it fit the Danielle they knew, but then again, maybe they never really knew her. Maybe beneath the calm, the kindness, the routine, there was a woman unraveling in silence. And maybe that unraveling reached its final thread sometime between 1:45 and 2 a.m. on March 10th, behind a locked bathroom door, under the soft hum of lavender candles, when the world believed she was safe. She had vanished into the night, and no one had any idea where she had gone, or if she ever meant to come back. In the days that followed Danielle Morgan's disappearance, Savannah held its breath. At first, the city whispered her name in corners, coffee shops, beauty salons, church halls, as if saying it too loudly might shatter the image they all held of her. The girl with the soft voice and steady smile, the teacher who brought extra lunches for students who had none, the woman who seemed born to be loved. But as the days turned into weeks, those whispers began to curl at the edges, growing darker, more speculative. The media called it a cold-footed bride, implying cowardice dressed in white. But those who knew Danielle, or believed they did, refused to accept such a simple answer. Marcus Taylor, her fiancé, became a fixture at press conferences, his usually composed demeanor slowly cracking under the weight of uncertainty. He kept wearing the silver watch Danielle had given him on their 3rd anniversary, as if it could somehow tether her to this reality. He told reporters she had been excited about the wedding, about the future, about starting a family. "She wasn't running from me," he said once, voice tight. "If anything, she was running from something none of us could see." That sentence haunted him, because deep down a small part of him wondered, had he missed it? Had there been signs? Had he been so focused on being her rock that he never noticed the quiet erosion of her foundation? Savannah PD's Missing Persons Unit followed every standard protocol, interviewed friends, traced financial records, reviewed surveillance footage from nearby businesses, but nothing yielded a clear path. That is, until Detective Clara Nguyen reviewed Danielle's bank statements and flagged a detail too intentional to ignore. 3 weeks before her disappearance, Danielle had booked a consultation at a cosmetic clinic in Atlanta under the name Renee Mitchell. That appointment had been cancelled the day after it was made, but it was enough to trigger a deeper dive into public records, and soon a pattern began to emerge. 5 months prior, Danielle had applied for multiple copies of her birth certificate, not unusual for someone preparing to get married, but more than were necessary. She had also made inquiries at a small legal office known for handling name changes, not through the lens of marriage, but for privacy or security reasons. All of it quiet, all of it precise. It was as if she had been laying the bricks of a second life, one invisible to the people in her first. Marcus didn't believe it at first. "She would have told me," he whispered, staring blankly at a stack of paperwork Detective Nguyen had brought him. "We talked about everything." But as he flipped through the notes, handwritten appointment reminders, online receipts for prepaid phone cards, a train ticket purchased under a false name, he began to feel the slow, dizzying realization that perhaps the woman he loved was a mystery even to herself. That wasn't easy to accept, not for a man who had chosen her as his forever. The deeper the investigation went, the more fractured the image of Danielle became. Her mother, Lorraine Morgan, initially resisted the idea that her daughter had orchestrated her own disappearance. My baby wouldn't do that. She was steady, she was strong, she insisted. But eventually even she admitted that Danielle had been quieter in the final weeks, more withdrawn. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That was the detail that stuck. Faith, one of Danielle's closest friends, remembered a conversation just a month earlier, when Danielle had come over for tea and, seemingly out of nowhere, asked, "Do you ever wonder what your life might have looked like if you'd just stepped off the path?" Faith had laughed, not realizing Danielle wasn't joking. Danielle didn't laugh back. "Sometimes I think I took a wrong turn years ago," she said, "and now I don't know how to get back." That admission, once dismissed as emotional fatigue, now felt like a red flag no one had recognized in time. But what path had she meant? Teaching? Marriage? Or the life she had carefully crafted to look perfect on the outside? A breakthrough came on April 2nd, 23 days after Danielle vanished. A Greyhound station employee in Macon, Georgia, contacted authorities to report a woman matching Danielle's description purchasing a one-way ticket to Birmingham, Alabama, paid in cash, wearing sunglasses indoors, carrying no visible ID. Surveillance footage confirmed it. It was her. She was alone, calm, controlled. That image hit Marcus like a freight train, not frightened, not kidnapped, just gone. By choice. The revelation shattered what little comfort he had left. That Danielle might have left willingly meant she had been suffering quietly, and perhaps he had been part of the noise she was trying to escape. The bus ticket wasn't the only clue. In a storage unit registered under the name Monique Ellis in suburban Augusta, investigators found a small suitcase. Inside was a new passport application, 2 burner phones, a stack of old photos, including one of Marcus, and a folded piece of stationery that read, in Danielle's handwriting, "If I ever stop being myself, I hope I have the courage to disappear." Detective Nguyen stood silently over that note, the weight of its meaning sinking in. Danielle hadn't just vanished, she had prepared to vanish. She had built her escape like a blueprint. But what could drive a woman so loved, so grounded, so seemingly certain of her path, to simply step off it? And more hauntingly, what was waiting for her at the end of this new road she had chosen alone? It was a Thursday afternoon when the name first surfaced, quietly, almost like a whisper, between lines of data that no one had thought to connect. Detective Clara Nguyen had been sorting through Danielle's burner phone records, chasing down every number logged in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, when she found it. A series of brief, late-night calls to a prepaid phone registered in a now-closed mailbox service in Atlanta. The phone was inactive, the mailbox long abandoned, but one name was attached to the original rental contract, Clarence Bishop. It sounded ordinary enough, a name you might miss in a crowd. But as Nguyen typed it into the department's private criminal intelligence system, the screen shifted, and for a moment the fluorescent lights above her desk seemed to flicker. Clarence Bishop was not just a name, he was a ghost with fingerprints. 10 years earlier, he'd been a respected corporate attorney in Chicago, known for his brilliance in legal loopholes and high-profile client confidentiality. But in 2007, everything changed. Bishop had been quietly disbarred after being caught facilitating false identity packages, complete with birth certificates, social security numbers, and driver's licenses, for clients seeking to disappear from creditors, abusive relationships, or, in some cases, law enforcement. His license was revoked, but he was never prosecuted. The trail went cold after a supposed move to Miami. Now he was back, or at least his name was. According to one FBI internal memo Nguyen uncovered, Clarence Bishop had resurfaced briefly in 2013, flagged in a tax fraud case involving fabricated identities. He was suspected of operating a covert relocation service, helping people vanish and reappear with new names, new lives, new stories. Clients paid in cash, no paper trail, no questions. The service was rumored to involve more than forged documents. Some said he coached clients in behavioral mimicry, speech shifts, physical transformation, a man who could teach you how to become someone else. Nguyen sat back in her chair, goosebumps crawling along her arms. Danielle had searched for something in the dark, and someone had answered. But where had they met? Where had this plan been born? A deeper dive into traffic camera data along I-16 revealed that Danielle's car had made a discreet detour to Atlanta twice in the month before she vanished. Each time she parked near Edgewood Avenue, a neighborhood known for its coffee shops, tattoo parlors, and discreet back offices. One specific building caught Nguyen's eye, an old brick storefront once used as a notary office, now shuttered but recently leased under an LLC named C. Bishop Consulting. It had no website, no public-facing service, but power bills confirmed it was active until 2 weeks after Danielle disappeared. Nguyen stood across from it the next day, staring at the faded "For Lease" sign taped to the cracked window. Inside, the rooms were empty. No furniture, no documents, just the faint smell of printer ink and bleach. Whoever Clarence was, he had cleaned his tracks well. Still, in the back alley behind the building, wedged beneath a rusted drain pipe, was a torn piece of manila folder, half soaked from rain, nearly illegible. But one word stood out: Morgan. And that was enough. When Nguyen returned to Savannah and shared the findings with Marcus, he didn't speak for almost a full minute. He just stood by the window, jaw tense, watching the light fade over the marshland, like someone mourning a sunset that wasn't supposed to happen. "So she hired him," he finally said, barely above a whisper. "She didn't just leave, she erased herself." Nguyen nodded gently. "It looks that way, but there's more." She showed him a black and white security photo from an Atlanta train station dated February 28th, 12 days before the disappearance. Danielle, in a hooded coat and dark sunglasses, stood with her back partially turned to the camera. Beside her was a man, tall, dark-skinned, in a charcoal suit and wool trench coat. His posture straight, expression unreadable. Clarence Bishop, the man behind the mask. But what haunted Marcus more than the image itself was the posture Danielle held, upright, calm, not frightened. Her hand rested lightly on her purse strap, the other slipped into her coat pocket. Not a woman being coerced, a woman preparing. "She trusted him," Marcus murmured, "more than she trusted me." That admission hollowed something in him he couldn't name. Over the next few days, new pieces began to fall into place. Surveillance from a pharmacy outside Atlanta captured Danielle purchasing hair dye, contact lenses, and a box of facial contouring tools often used by amateur actors. A local cash-for-gold pawn shop confirmed she sold a bracelet Marcus had given her, one she never took off, 2 days before she vanished. The disguise, the cash, the timing, it was all deliberate. But the question lingered like a splinter in Marcus's mind: why go to such lengths? What was she escaping from that couldn't be spoken aloud? Or was she not escaping but transforming? Tasha, her friend, offered a chilling memory. "There was this night, maybe 6 months ago," she said, eyes glistening. "Danielle told me she sometimes woke up feeling like she was living inside someone else's skin, like she had built a life she didn't recognize. She said, 'If I ever go missing, just know I chose freedom.' I thought she was being poetic. Maybe she was. Or maybe she was warning them all. The truth about Clarence Bishop remained murky. His identity, according to the FBI, had been used as a cover by at least 3 different individuals in the past decade, possibly an alias passed through a network, or a ghost name for a secretive service. But the man in the photo with Danielle, he was real. He was alive. And he knew where she went. The problem was, no one knew where he was. The lease ended, the phones disconnected, the building emptied. He had done what he always did, disappear, taking his clients with him into whatever new lives they believed they needed. But this time he had taken a piece of Savannah's heart with him. And now Marcus was left staring into the night, asking a question that cut deeper than betrayal. Had Danielle been saved or stolen? The envelope was thin, just a simple yellow manila pouch with no return address and a single line of typewritten text on the back that read, "You missed something." It arrived at the Savannah Police Department on a Monday morning in August 2016, 17 months after Danielle Morgan vanished without a trace. Detective Clara Nguyen opened it carefully, already used to receiving hoaxes, false tips, and the occasional cruel prank from anonymous sources who fed off unsolved cases. But this one was different. Inside were 5 printed photographs, grainy and slightly overexposed like they'd been taken with a low-end camera or copied from video footage. The first 4 showed nothing unusual, snapshots of a city sidewalk, the interior of a cafe, the blurred face of a woman walking through a crosswalk. But the 5th photo stopped her cold. It was the waiting room of a clinic, fluorescent lights above, plastic orange chairs lined along a green wall, a faded poster on immunization standards in the background. But what mattered, what made Nguyen's fingers tighten around the photo, was the woman sitting in the 3rd chair from the left. Danielle. Or someone who looked so much like her, it turned the air in the room electric. Her hair was shorter now, dyed chestnut, and curled inward at the chin. Her body looked thinner, almost brittle, like she'd been stretched by stress or hunger or time. She wore a plain blue button-up shirt and tan slacks, and her eyes, those distinct, almond-shaped eyes, stared down at a clipboard in her lap. But it was the posture that said the most. Calm, alert, not nervous, not hiding, just waiting. Nguyen showed the photograph to Marcus later that day. His breath caught. "That's her." His voice cracked. "She's alive." He held the image in shaking hands, tracing her silhouette with a kind of reverence that bordered on disbelief. "Where is this? What is this place?" Nguyen had the same questions. The photo had no metadata, no date stamp, no location tag. But the background, the color of the wall, the shape of the chairs, the layout, felt oddly familiar. It took 3 days and the help of a sharp-eyed nurse on the department's informant list to match the waiting room to a private health clinic in Decatur, Georgia. The clinic specialized in outpatient psychological support and cosmetic consultations. Danielle, or the woman resembling her, had been spotted there in the spring of 2015, weeks after she vanished. Detective Nguyen and Marcus drove out together. The clinic administrator, after some gentle pressure and the presentation of a subpoena, confirmed what they hoped and feared. Danielle Morgan had been seen there, but not under that name. She had registered as Ava Thompson, claiming she was seeking anxiety treatment and mild appearance counseling, paid in cash, used no insurance, no emergency contact listed. Nguyen requested security footage from that time, but the clinic only kept tapes for 90 days. Still, one staff member, a receptionist named Gloria, remembered her. "Polite," she said. "Quiet." She didn't smile much, but she looked like she was carrying something too heavy to name. Gloria remembered something else, too, the man who accompanied her the first time. Tall, dark skin, formal clothes. "He waited outside in a black sedan," she said. "Didn't come in, but I saw her get in the car when she left." That was Clarence. There was no doubt. Danielle hadn't disappeared because she was afraid. She had disappeared because she was already in motion, already mid-transformation. The clinic's intake notes were sparse, but haunting. Client expresses disconnection from previous self. One note read, "Discussed desire to shed everything old and begin again." She had declined referrals to long-term therapy, but accepted medication for generalized anxiety. Her handwriting on the forms was different, loopier, wider, as if trying to break away from who she used to be. Marcus stared at the documents in silence, jaw tight. "She planned it all," he said softly. "This wasn't a breakdown. It was a rebirth." But what Danielle didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the world she had walked into wasn't as clean as a new name or a new haircut. It was laced with shadows. Clarence Bishop, the man who had orchestrated her reinvention, was no longer just a ghost in records. He had officially been reported missing 3 months after Danielle's last confirmed clinic visit. The woman he helped disappear might have re-emerged, but the man himself never did. There were no more sightings, no more phone calls, no paper trail. He was simply gone. And that raised the question Marcus could no longer push aside. If Clarence had vanished, who was helping Danielle now? Or had she already gone further underground, beyond anyone's reach? Nguyen's instincts screamed that this was no longer just a missing persons case. It was a story about identity, yes, but also about control, about choices made in desperation, about escape disguised as empowerment. A woman had vanished, but the more they learned, the more it seemed like she had orchestrated her own disappearance with the precision of someone escaping something much more intimate than danger. Herself. Nguyen asked the clinic for copies of any prescriptions Danielle had filled under the Ava alias. One, in particular, stood out, a sedative rarely prescribed without a psychiatric history, which meant either Danielle had lied about her symptoms or her pain ran deeper than anyone realized. Marcus sat with the truth like a stone in his chest. The wedding, the life, the promises, they hadn't been enough to anchor her. He had loved her as deeply as he knew how, but even that love had failed to touch the part of her that had already started fading long before she climbed out of that bathroom window. And now? Now, somewhere in a city she no longer called home, under a name no one could trace, Danielle was living a life none of them were allowed to see. But for how long? It began with a broken phone, or rather, what had been left of it, cracked screen, corroded battery, a tiny SD card forgotten inside the lining of a velvet jewelry box that Danielle's mother, Lorraine, had refused to throw away. She'd kept it in the bottom drawer of her bedroom vanity, alongside childhood report cards, pressed church programs, and the dried petals from Danielle's high school prom corsage. It was September 2017, over 2 years since Danielle vanished, when she finally allowed herself to open the drawer again. She had been organizing clothes for donation, clearing out space she never wanted to admit, had become sacred with grief. She didn't expect to find anything new. But when her fingers grazed the velvet and she felt the faint bulge inside, she paused. The phone had belonged to Danielle. It had been reported missing after her disappearance, but was never recovered, until now. Lorraine brought it directly to Detective Nguyen, her hands trembling. "I didn't even realize she still had it," she whispered. I thought maybe she'd left it behind." Nguyen had the phone analyzed at the tech forensics lab the same day. Most of the device was corrupted, water damage, likely from age and moisture. But the SD card inside was intact. It contained photos, mostly old, a few selfies with Marcus, a video of her students singing Happy Birthday. But the last file on the card wasn't a photo, it was an audio file, unsaved, never sent, a voice memo created on March 9, 2015, just one day before Danielle vanished. Nguyen played it once in the lab, headphones in, back straight, pen in hand, but she didn't write a word, she just listened, and when it ended, she sat still for several minutes before whispering, "We've been looking in the wrong direction." She called Marcus, asked him to meet at the precinct. When he arrived, she handed him the headphones and pressed play. Danielle's voice emerged soft, strained, barely above a whisper. "I'm recording this because I can't say it out loud," she began. There was a pause, a sound like pacing footsteps across hardwood. "I love you, Marcus. That hasn't changed, but I can't do this, not because of you, because of me." Another pause. The sound of a breath being held and released. "There are pieces of me that don't fit inside this life. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But some mornings I wake up and feel like I've borrowed my own body from someone else, like I'm acting in a movie I didn't audition for." Her voice cracked on the next line. "You would have been a good husband. The kind that remembers birthdays and folds laundry and keeps promises. But I don't know how to be the kind of wife who doesn't feel like she's disappearing just by standing still." There was a long silence after that. No words. Just faint rustling, like fingers brushing against a tablecloth or skin against paper. Then quietly, "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just need to know who I am when no one else is watching." The file ended there. Marcus sat frozen, his jaw clenched, his eyes glassed over. Nguyen said nothing. She didn't need to. For all the pain he'd carried, imagining betrayal, imagining captivity, imagining every horrible scenario, the truth hit differently. Danielle hadn't been taken. She had unraveled silently right in front of them. And in her last unsent message, she hadn't asked for help. She had asked for space and vanished to find it. Still, the recording left new questions. Why save it and never send it? Had she changed her mind, been interrupted? Or was the recording never meant for Marcus at all, but for herself, a time capsule of goodbye? Nguyen reopened a timeline of Danielle's last 72 hours, now coloured by this confession. She focused on digital records, the final texts, the phone calls, the search history Danielle had tried to erase. And that's when something unusual appeared. Danielle had researched emergency ID change and how to disappear legally at least 8 times in February. But 2 days before the party, she searched something different. If you regret running away, can you come back? It was a single question typed at 3:12 a.m., a moment of hesitation, a moment of fear or guilt, and perhaps a window. For Marcus, that changed everything. "She didn't vanish because she hated me," he murmured. "She vanished because she thought she was vanishing already, and no one saw it happening." He began to reframe everything. The unanswered texts, the quiet sighs over dinner, the way she sometimes stayed up long after he went to bed, lights on in the kitchen, staring out the window like she was waiting for something she couldn't name. The signs were always there. But love, real, deep, trusting love, sometimes blinds us to the possibility that the person we adore is hurting in ways we can't fix. In the days that followed, Nguyen reached out to several psychiatric clinics across Georgia with Danielle's photo and aliases, Ava Thompson, Renee Mitchell. One clinic in Athens responded. A patient matching her photo had come in for anxiety-related treatment in May 2015 under the name Diane Curtis, paid in cash. She was stable, polite, responsive, and then disappeared again. No further sessions, no records of prescriptions filled under that alias afterward, no credit activity, just like before, a clean exit. "She's not running," Nguyen said quietly one evening, reviewing the memo again. "She's shedding." The metaphor stuck with Marcus. Danielle wasn't trying to vanish from the world. She was trying to shed the version of herself she had been expected to be. And every name she'd taken, every address she'd left behind, was a layer peeled away in search of something true. But the tragedy wasn't that she left. It was that she didn't feel safe enough to stay. And the real question now wasn't where Danielle had gone. It was, would she ever believe she could come back? The letter arrived on a humid July afternoon in 2018, nearly 3.5 years since Danielle Morgan slipped through the seams of her life. It was addressed not to Marcus, nor to Lorraine, nor to anyone formally involved in the investigation. Instead, it came tucked inside the mailbox of a small bookstore in Charleston, South Carolina, a place Danielle had visited only once during a weekend trip years earlier. The store owner, a widowed man named Elliot Hayes, found it while sorting through incoming mail. It was handwritten in blue ink on the back of a recycled map, folded cleanly into thirds, and sealed with masking tape. There was no return address, only a single name scrawled on the envelope, Marie Bennett. The store had no record of such a person, no customer file, no previous deliveries. At first, Elliot thought it was misdelivered junk or maybe a prank, but something about the writing, deliberate yet slightly slanted, almost trembling, made him hesitate. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, creased from being carried. The message was short, unpunctuated, and oddly poetic. "I don't know if you remember me, or if I was ever really here to begin with, but there are days when the name Danielle feels like a stranger, and nights when it feels like a scar I can't peel off. I've been a waitress, a motel clerk, a street musician. I've been no one and everyone. Sometimes I wonder what it feels like to stay. but my body forgets how to belong before the sun comes up. Tell the woman in the mirror I still think of her, even if I don't look like her anymore. The signature at the bottom was illegible, just a looping initial that could have been a D, an M, or nothing at all. Elliot had no idea what it meant, but after a curious Google search led him to articles about Danielle Morgan's disappearance, something in his gut told him it mattered. He contacted the Savannah Police Department and overnighted the letter to Detective Clara Nguyen, attaching a note. "I don't know what this is, but it doesn't feel like fiction." Nguyen received the envelope 2 days later and spent over an hour just holding it before she opened it. She didn't need handwriting analysis. She had spent the past 3 years reading Danielle's school notes, journal entries, and letters to Marcus. She knew that voice, the lowercase letters, the rhythm, the sadness that seeped between lines like spilled ink. Danielle, or someone trying very hard to stop being her. The letter changed everything and nothing all at once. It proved she was alive, at least recently. It suggested she was still drifting, perhaps tired of vanishing, but unable to stop. But it also revealed something darker. Danielle was losing her tether to who she had been. Not running from danger, not hiding from abusers, just dissolving. Nguyen contacted Elliot Hayes directly. He remembered nothing unusual, no suspicious visitors, no unfamiliar faces. But he did recall, weeks earlier, a young woman with cropped hair and a soft voice asking if she could leave a gift for someone named Marie. She'd been polite, forgettable in the way only people who want to disappear can be. She smiled like she hadn't used her mouth in days, Elliot said. Surveillance footage from the bookstore's outdoor camera confirmed it. A woman, late 20s or early 30s, baseball cap low over her face, entered at 6:17 p.m., stayed 7 minutes, and left on foot, heading south. Nguyen froze the image. Her face was mostly hidden, but the way she held the envelope in both hands before placing it gently on the counter, that small, tender movement, was unmistakably Danielle, or whatever version of her existed now. Nguyen drove to Charleston herself, walked the blocks where Danielle might have wandered, asked around cafes and second-hand stores, left her card in windows. No one remembered the woman in the cap. But outside a tattoo parlor on East Bay Street, Nguyen found something scrawled in permanent marker on a community wall. It read, "You can start over as many times as you want, you just can't bring everyone with you." Another signature-less message, another echo. She took a photo of it and sent it to Marcus. His reply came 20 minutes later, just 5 words. She's still trying to be free. But from what? Nguyen began reviewing Danielle's psychiatric records again, the clinic visits, the missed appointments, the prescriptions unfilled. She read every intake form and progress note like they were gospel. Patterns emerged. In each visit, Danielle described a sense of being watched and the fear of being known too well. Not stalked, not followed, just seen. Like being visible was a kind of exposure she couldn't tolerate. Nguyen brought this to Marcus over coffee. "She doesn't fear being found," she said softly. "She fears being recognized." He stared out the window, watching a mother and child cross the street. "So what do we do?" he asked. "Wait until she becomes someone we don't know?" Nguyen didn't answer. Because truthfully, that was already happening. Danielle wasn't just missing in location, she was missing in identity, in self. Piece by piece, she had sanded off the edges of her former life. New names, new faces, new versions, but none seemed to stick. And now, even in her own words, she no longer claimed Danielle as her own. The woman who had once been a teacher, a fiancée, a daughter, was now a note left in a bookstore, a ghost with no return address. And yet, in that single, aching sentence, "Tell the woman in the mirror I still think of her," there was something heartbreakingly human, a plea, a whisper, a remnant. Nguyen folded the letter carefully and filed it with the case notes. not as evidence, but as testimony, proof that even when someone disappears, they sometimes leave pieces of themselves behind, small, trembling clues that say, "I was here, I'm still trying, just not as who you remember." By the fall of 2018, Clarence Bishop was no longer just a name in a folder. He had become a shadow cast across every question Danielle Morgan had left behind. His role in her disappearance was no longer a theory, it was accepted truth. He had been the architect of her escape, the man she trusted to erase her old self and teach her how to become invisible. But what most people didn't know, what even Detective Clara Nguyen didn't fully understand until the Charleston letter arrived, was that Clarence himself had disappeared not long after Danielle. He had been reported missing by no one, no family, no employer, no friends, only the paper trail he had left behind, fraying at the edges like a rope, slowly unraveling in the dark. Clara pulled every record she could find, lease agreements, utilities, former aliases, past legal infractions. The man had lived like a traveler between lives, never staying long enough to leave roots, but always just long enough to leave footprints. In 2013, he rented a one-room office in Miami under the name Calvin Ross. In 2014, he was briefly linked to a tech consulting firm in Dallas that shut down under suspicious tax filings. But what made her freeze was a financial transfer dated May 3, 2015, less than 2 months after Danielle's disappearance. A payment of $75,000 wired to a shell company in Houston from an untraceable account listed under the name Bishop Solutions LLC. The transaction was flagged during a federal probe into identity laundering, but the case never went to trial. Clara followed the money and found more than she expected. Clarence hadn't just helped people like Danielle vanish, he'd done it for dozens. Men hiding from abusive spouses, women escaping human trafficking, white-collar executives ducking federal charges, even 2 teenage runaways who later reappeared under sealed juvenile records in another state. To some, Clarence Bishop was a savior, to others a criminal with a god complex. But everyone agreed on one thing. He never left loose ends. Until Danielle. And then, just like her, he vanished. The last known sighting of him was on May 14, 2015. Security footage from a bus station in Augusta, Georgia, showed a tall black man with salt and pepper hair boarding a coach bus heading west. He carried a black duffel bag and wore aviator sunglasses despite the dim lighting. The timestamp on the footage was 11:48 p.m. He never got off in Houston, never used his burner phone again, never withdrew another dollar from the Bishop LLC account. For 3 years, there had been nothing until now. In October 2018, Clara received an encrypted tip from a federal agent in Phoenix who'd been investigating a case of synthetic identity theft. The agent, David Hartman, sent over a blurred photo recovered from a hidden camera sting in a suspected forgery lab outside Tucson. Among the men in the grainy still frame was someone who looked eerily familiar, tall, dark-skinned, dressed in grey slacks and a long coat. Clara enhanced the image. It wasn't definitive, but it looked like Clarence. The timestamp was recent, just 5 weeks earlier. Hartman admitted they couldn't verify his presence. The lab had been abandoned before the raid, but fingerprints found on a water glass inside matched one alias once tied to Bishop. That was enough to raise an unsettling question. Had Clarence truly vanished, or had he simply gone deeper? Clara traveled to Phoenix to meet Hartman in person. Over stale diner coffee and a worn manila folder, he told her everything. "We've been tracking a network," he said. "People who don't just fake IDs, they build whole people. Social security numbers, bank histories, fake resumes, social media footprints. They can make someone exist or disappear. And your guy?" He was better at it than most. Clara asked the question that had haunted her for months. Did Danielle know? Hartman hesitated. If she did, she's part of something much bigger than just running from a wedding. The more Clara learned about Clarence, the more Danielle's story began to tilt. Maybe he had helped her, but maybe he had also used her. Maybe Danielle hadn't just vanished, Maybe she had been recruited, willingly or not, into a world built on erasure. But why? And where was Clarence now? Back in Savannah, Marcus sat in the quiet of his apartment, listening again to Danielle's unsent voice memo, as if it held codes he had yet to decipher. He had accepted long ago that the woman he loved was gone. But now, it seemed she hadn't just left him. She had stepped into a world where identity was currency, and she had paid dearly for the right to begin again. She said she felt like a ghost in her own skin. Marcus whispered to Clara when she returned. Maybe Clarence gave her a new body. But at what cost? Clara didn't answer. She couldn't. But deep down she feared the truth. Danielle had trusted a man who specialized in erasing pain through reinvention. But if Clarence had disappeared too, if the man who'd helped her escape was now on the run himself, what had they both been running from? And worse, were they running from the same thing? It surfaced on a Wednesday, like most things that change everything do, quietly, almost lazily, as if the universe hadn't quite realized the storm it had unleashed. Detective Clara Nguyen received it via an anonymous Dropbox link in her department email, subject line in all caps. You missed her. There was no message, no metadata trail, no sender, just one file, one photograph. She opened it without expecting much. She'd received dozens like this before. Blurry security shots of random women in airport lobbies, gas station mirrors, shadowed motel entrances. None had ever been her. None had ever been Danielle Morgan. Until now. The photo was taken in daylight, clearly by a phone. A quiet side street somewhere suburban. Rows of brown brick buildings in the background, a cracked sidewalk, and a weathered blue mailbox. But in the foreground, leaning against a railing outside a laundromat, was a woman. Cropped hair, oversized hoodie, head tilted as she reached for something inside a paper bag. Her face was turned 3/4 away, but not enough to hide what the eyes couldn't unsee. The curve of her cheek, the angle of her jaw, the exact unmistakable scar along her right eyebrow, faint, but to anyone who knew her, loud as a siren. It was Danielle, older, perhaps thinner, but her, no question. The timestamp burned into the bottom of the frame said April 11, 2019, 3:12 p.m., which meant she was alive, she was in the country, and she had just made a mistake. Clara zoomed in. The photo had been taken from a parked car, judging by the angle, through a slightly dirty passenger window. That meant the sender had been there too, watching her, not helping, not speaking, just documenting. The laundromat's name in the background was barely visible, Riverside Wash and Fold, but it was enough. Clara ran it through every regional business directory. There were dozens across the country, but only one with matching architecture, just outside of Richmond, Virginia. She didn't hesitate. Within 4 hours, Clara was there, standing in front of the same rusted blue mailbox, the same dusty laundromat awning, the same parking spot. The photo had been taken from 20 feet away. She checked the camera angle again, and that's when she noticed something else, barely visible in the reflection of the laundromat's front glass door. A figure inside, holding a phone. Tall, male, wearing a grey coat. Clara's heart thudded. Clarence Bishop. She reviewed every frame. It was him, or someone who wanted to be mistaken for him. And that raised the most dangerous question yet. Was Danielle being followed or escorted? She stepped into the laundromat. The woman behind the counter, middle-aged with tired eyes, remembered Danielle instantly. She was quiet, didn't say much, came in, washed 2 loads, read a book while she waited. Clara's voice barely came out. Did she come alone? The woman nodded slowly. Far as I saw, yeah. She sat over there by the vending machine, about 2 hours. Then she left. Didn't even fold her stuff, just shoved it all in a backpack and went. Clara showed her a photo of Clarence. The woman blinked. Couldn't say. A man did come in around then, stayed maybe 5 minutes, but I thought he was waiting for his wife or something. Didn't seem to know her. Clara turned that over and over in her mind. Not seeming to know someone. That was Clarence's specialty. Knowing how to look invisible, how to move through places like a ghost that never touches the ground. She pulled surveillance footage from the dry cleaner next door. It confirmed her worst suspicion. Danielle entered at 1:03 p.m. At 2:56 p.m., a tall man in a long coat walked by the glass, paused briefly, looked inside, then turned and disappeared around the corner. Danielle never noticed, but she looked up at the glass door twice, almost like she felt something, as if the air had thickened. Clara felt sick. This wasn't a simple case of vanishing anymore. This was presence without contact, sight without acknowledgement. Danielle was being watched, maybe protected, or maybe monitored. She checked with local hotels, homeless shelters, hostels. No trace. But the gas station across the street, an older clerk named Manny, said something strange. "You mean the lady with the coin jar?" he asked. Clara blinked. "What?" She came in a few days before that photo was taken, bought a burner phone, paid with rolled quarters and nickels, didn't want a receipt, said it was for emergencies only. Clara leaned in. "Did she use her name?" He laughed. "Not a chance, but she dropped something as she left." He handed her a bus ticket. The name on it said Marie Bennett. It was unused, dated 2 weeks earlier. Destination? Pittsburgh. Another false trail, or a discarded plan. Clara added it to the evidence board, now an overwhelming constellation of string and printouts, all orbiting Danielle's untraceable silhouette. Marcus came to the precinct later that night. She showed him the photo. He didn't speak for a full minute. His hand trembled slightly as he touched the printout. "She looks tired," he whispered. "She looks—" "Haunted," Clara finished. "Yes," Marcus nodded. "Haunted." Neither of them said what they were really thinking, that perhaps Danielle had never been truly lost, only deliberately alone. That maybe vanishing wasn't the wound. Maybe it was the only way she knew how to survive. Clara leaned back. "Whoever sent this," she said, "wanted us to find her, or to remind us we can't." Marcus studied the photo again. "Then they made one mistake." "What's that?" "They forgot we remember her face better than she does." The rain had started somewhere near Fredericksburg and hadn't let up since. It rolled across Clara's windshield like thin fingers tapping in code, as if the sky itself was whispering that something was about to break. The call had come just after midnight, not from a source, not from a tip line, but from a number that Marcus had long since stopped believing in. The burner phone Danielle had bought at the gas station. It rang once, then disconnected. But the trace had been enough. Cell towers in Henrico County had pinged it near Route 33. Clara and Marcus drove there in silence, the kind that clung between them like steam on cold glass. They didn't talk about the photo. They didn't talk about how Marcus had been watching old videos of Danielle reading poetry, her voice soft and certain, as if every word she said was an oath. They didn't talk about how her ghost had become more real than her memory. The place was called the Willow Creek Inn, but there were no willows and it was barely an inn. Peeling paint, a neon sign blinking its final breaths, and a front desk behind thick, bulletproof glass. The manager looked like he hadn't slept since 1999. Clara flashed her badge. "Room logs, 3 days back?" He barely glanced up. "We take cash. No IDs. Unless they trash the place, I don't ask questions." But he did have cameras. Old, analog, time-stamped like some relic of the 90s. Clara scanned the footage herself. And at 2:13 a.m. the previous night, a hooded figure entered room 8. Petite build, slouched shoulders, a black duffel bag, no clear face shot, but Clara didn't need one. It was Danielle. The way she moved, cautious but not hurried, familiar with shadows, screamed of someone who had rehearsed disappearing. She was alone. No Clarence, No handler, just her. The room hadn't been touched since. Marcus stood in the doorway while Clara eased the door open with gloved hands. The smell hit first, mold, cleaning bleach, something older, sadder. The bed was made, the shower hadn't been used. The only clue that someone had been there was a nearly full bottle of water, condensation still fresh, and a burner phone tucked beneath the pillow. Clara picked it up carefully. "No lock screen," she whispered. "Old model, no data connection." She powered it on, one voicemail, one message, one. She hit play. The voice came out fractured, broken through static.
"I'm sorry. If you find this, it means I got scared again. I was close. I wanted to come back. I saw you, Marcus, across the street. I almost crossed. But then I saw someone else. He shouldn't have known where I was. I think he followed me. I think Clarence is watching me. Or someone using his face."
A pause, a shaky breath. I wanted to explain everything, but how do you explain running from the only person who ever loved you right? "I'm not who I was, and I'm not who you remember. I'm something else now. I hope one day that will be okay with you, or at least understandable." Another long pause.
"I miss your laugh. God, I miss your laugh."
And then silence. Clara and Marcus stood there, the buzz of the voicemail still humming in the quiet like an aftershock. "That was her," Marcus said, voice cracking. "That was really her." Clara nodded slowly, her mind spinning on the one sentence that wouldn't let go. Someone using his face? What did that mean? Clarence had vanished years ago. If he was alive, why follow Danielle? And if he wasn't, then who had taken his place? She checked the motel's guest book. Meaningless initials, cities that didn't exist. But room 9 had been rented an hour after Danielle. Cash. No license plate on the security footage. A man in a grey hoodie, larger build, walking slow, not Clarence, but deliberate, watching. He hadn't knocked on Danielle's door, hadn't interacted, just stayed the night next to her room and left minutes after she did at dawn. Back at the precinct, Clara ran facial recognition against the grainy footage. Nothing solid. But one match came back flagged from a Homeland Security watch list, a man known only by the alias Silas, suspected of involvement in false identity rings across Arizona and Nevada. If he was in Virginia now, it meant the network that Clarence had been a part of, or that he had tried to escape, was active again, possibly hunting its own. Clara printed stills from the footage and pinned them beside Danielle's photo. Marcus sat nearby, eyes red, whispering to himself, looping the voicemail like it was a hymn. "She saw me," he said. "She was right there." Clara didn't know how to console him. Maybe she didn't want to. Maybe the hardest part of a search like this wasn't the not knowing. It was the almost knowing. The moments so close to contact that they burned worse than absence. The voicemail had no geotag, no code word. But Danielle's phrasing struck Clara like a thread trying to lead somewhere. "Not who I was, not who you remember." It echoed like a confession or a warning. "Do you think she wants to come back?" Marcus asked, voice barely audible. Clara stared at the photo one more time. The reflection in the glass. The voicemail. The trail of fear wrapped in technology and half-truths. "I think," she said, "Danielle is still deciding if she can be found before someone else finds her first." And suddenly the game had changed. This was no longer a case of disappearance. It was a race, and someone else had just entered the motel ahead of them. The call came at 3:47 a.m., a fire, residential, abandoned property on the outskirts of Charlottesville. What made it different wasn't the flames. It was the name the fire chief mentioned while filing the report. A neighbor claimed the property was occasionally visited by a woman named Marie Bennett. That was the same alias Danielle had used on the bus ticket she never used. Clara sat up in bed like lightning had struck the floor beneath her. Marcus was already in the car when she called. "I'm on my way," was all he said. By the time they arrived, the scene looked like a forgotten war zone, soot-stained siding, windows blown out, and the shell of a house still bleeding steam into the dawn mist. Firefighters were packing up. The smell of burnt paper, charred plastic, and scorched wood clung to the air like a final warning. The fire chief, a tall woman named Rodriguez, met them at the tape line. "Started around midnight," she said. "No utilities hooked up, no sign of squatters, but the burn pattern says it was started from the back bedroom, intentionally." Clara stepped over the rubble with cautious feet. The interior was gutted, every surface blackened, but the room in the back, the origin, had one thing left unburnt, a piece of scorched drywall behind a rusted mirror, miraculously spared by the flames. On that drywall, someone had written in pencil, "Not yet." 2 words, just that, but they hit Clara like a gunshot. Back at the mobile command unit, the arson team revealed something else. Among the melted debris, they had recovered a partial fingerprint, one pressed against the lid of a burned metal lockbox. The print was clear enough for analysis. 40 minutes later, the match came back. Danielle Morgan. Marcus stared at the report like it was a lie. So she was here, maybe even minutes before the fire started. Clara nodded. Or minutes after. Maybe she started it herself. But why? To destroy something or to signal them? Inside the remains of the lockbox, they found one other object. A burned photo. A picture of Danielle as a teenager, standing between 2 people who had never come up in the case file. One was Clarence Bishop. The other was a woman. Black, early 30s, holding a child in her arms. Someone had drawn an X over her face in red ink. "This isn't just about Danielle disappearing," Clara said. "This is about something she knew, or someone she's protecting." Rodriguez re-entered the room, holding a clear evidence bag. "You're going to want to see this," she said. Inside the bag was a USB drive, its plastic casing half melted. Clara handed it off to tech. They recovered one file, corrupted, but partially viewable. It was a 47-second video grainy shot from a hidden camera. In the video, Danielle sat across from someone in a dimly lit motel room. Her face looked strained, hollowed. "If you're watching this," she whispered, "then I failed again." She paused. "But maybe it's time someone else finishes this." That was all. Marcus stared at the frozen frame. "She knew she was being hunted," he said. "She was leaving us clues in case she didn't make it." They spent the next 6 hours canvassing the neighborhood. A gas station clerk remembered seeing Danielle days earlier. She bought lighter fluid, matches, and prepaid cards. When asked if she seemed nervous, he replied, "No, she seemed like someone who had finally decided something." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The 2 words on the wall haunted her. Not yet. Not yet what? Not yet safe? Not yet ready? Not yet found? Or maybe it was a message to someone else. Clarence? Or worse, whoever was pretending to be him. The next day, a new piece fell into place. Tech had decrypted metadata from the burned USB. The file had originally been saved on a laptop traced back to a fake purchase order linked to a shell company. That company, Clara realized with a sinking heart, was one of 4 listed on a document buried deep in the original Bishop case, the same network Clarence had turned against. Danielle hadn't just run from her past. She had been circling it, burning its edges, slowly, methodically, destroying the pieces that could trace back to something darker than anyone had imagined.
Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "She's not hiding anymore. She's dismantling it."
Clara looked at the photo again, the woman with the child, the X over her face. "Do you think," she asked slowly, "that Danielle's not the one in danger anymore?" Marcus turned. "You think she's trying to protect that woman?"
"No," Clara said. "I think she's trying to avenge her."
Silence fell between them. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft at first, then faster, heavier, washing away the ashes, but not the message. Not yet. The photo had haunted Clara all night, not just because of what it showed, but because of what it implied. 3 people, Danielle, Clarence Bishop, and an unnamed woman with a baby in her arms. The woman's face was crossed out in red ink, a threat, a memory, or maybe a message. Clara sent the image to facial recognition, social media crawlers, missing persons databases, anything that might give this ghost a name. It was Marcus who made the connection. He recognized the baby. "I've seen that boy before," he said, pulling out an old folder from the original Danielle case. Inside was a community bulletin from a shelter in Richmond. This photo was taken the year Danielle volunteered here, just for a few weeks, low-key, under an alias. But that baby, he pointed, was the son of a woman named Marla Gaines. The name rang no bells, but the records showed that Marla had once filed a restraining order, not against a man, but against a government contractor operating under an identity laundering ring connected to Clarence Bishop's alias network. It had been quietly dropped, the records nearly buried. Clara's jaw clenched. Someone tried to disappear her, or silence her, and Danielle had tried to protect her. They drove down to Petersburg, where Marla was last known to live, a modest town, forgotten by industry and left behind by time. Clara knocked on the weathered door of a grey duplex. A curtain shifted. Then slowly the door opened. A woman stood there in her late 30s, skin warm brown and weathered by hard years. Her eyes flicked from Clara to Marcus, then back again. "I'm not answering questions without a lawyer." Clara held up the photo. "We're not here to pressure you. We're here because Danielle Morgan is alive, and we think she's trying to protect you." The woman froze. Slowly, she stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. Around her neck was a red scarf, worn and faded, but wrapped tight, like armor. "She's not safe, is she?" Marla whispered. Clara shook her head. "Neither are you." They sat inside a dim living room. Marla didn't cry. She didn't speak for a long time. Only when her son, now nearly 12, entered to grab a glass of water did she finally begin. She showed up on a rainy night. No umbrella. Just stood at the shelter door like a ghost who forgot to knock. Said she could help. And she did. For a few weeks, she cleaned floors, passed out blankets, played with the kids. But there was something in her eyes, like she was watching shadows the rest of us couldn't see. Marla took a breath. One night, she pulled me aside, said if anyone came asking for me, I should lie, that my son and I should change our names again. I thought she was paranoid, until someone broke into my apartment 2 days later. Clara leaned forward. Did she ever mention a name, a place, anything about her past? She said only one thing. There are people who build cages that look like homes. I ran before mine locked. Marcus clenched his fists. And Clarence? Marla nodded. She didn't trust him, not anymore. Said the person she once knew had disappeared, that someone else had taken his place. I thought she meant emotionally. Now I'm not sure. Outside, a car passed slowly, too slowly. Clara's instincts kicked in. She stood. We need to move you both, now! They packed Marla and her son into an unmarked SUV and drove them to a safe house managed by the U.S. Marshals. Not an official relocation, yet, but enough to keep her away from prying eyes. Back at HQ, Clara played the voicemail from Danielle again.
"I think he followed me. I think Clarence is watching me, or someone using his face."
Could someone be impersonating him? Marcus asked. I mean really impersonating him? Plastic surgery, identity theft, something deeper? Clara shook her head. It's possible, but I'm starting to believe something else. She pulled up files from the original Bishop investigation, his affiliations, his ties to the alias-for-hire underworld, and, more troubling, his rumored ties to a larger network involved in witness relocation manipulation, taking in people who wanted to disappear and then turning them into leverage. What if Clarence never went rogue? Clara said quietly. What if Danielle discovered the program was never meant to save anyone, but to control them? Marcus stood in stunned silence. The pieces were shifting. Danielle hadn't just vanished to start over. She had escaped something monstrous, something that still had its eyes on her. And now those eyes were turning toward anyone she had once tried to save.
Marla, her son, Marcus, maybe even Clara.
That night, Clara received a package at her apartment. No return address. Inside was a red scarf, identical to Marla's, and a note. If you found her, they found you. The red is not just a warning, it's a map. Find me before they do. Below the note was a single GPS coordinate, somewhere deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Danielle wasn't running anymore. She was waiting. The GPS coordinate led them to a place not found on maps, somewhere along the edge of the Shenandoah, where cell towers gave up and only the sound of gravel under tires remained. The last 10 miles they had to hike, through winding trails, thick with fog and silence. Clara gripped the red scarf tight in her jacket pocket, its weight heavier than it looked. Each step felt like a countdown. Marcus moved ahead, flashlight cutting through the trees. "She chose this place for a reason," he said quietly. "Somewhere even shadows hesitate to follow." By the time they reached the clearing, the first light of dawn had begun to break. A small cabin stood there, half hidden by moss and weathered pine. It looked uninhabited, forgotten. But there were signs. A warm ember glow beneath the chimney. A single red thread hanging from a nail on the door. Clara stepped forward and knocked once, then again. Silence. She was about to knock a third time when the door creaked open, and there she stood, Danielle Morgan, older than the photo, thinner. Her eyes carried 1,000 miles and more, but there was a sharpness to them, not fear, not regret, but resolve. She didn't speak right away. She looked from Clara to Marcus, then to the scarf in Clara's pocket. "You found her," Danielle said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then it's over." They stepped inside. The cabin was modest, a table, a cot, a wall lined with notebooks and maps, faces pinned to corkboards, names scratched out, tracks and trails, false identities, shell companies. But at the center of it all, pinned in red string, was one photo. Clarence Bishop. Clara turned. "Is it really him?" Danielle shook her head. "It used to be. Now it's not." She explained everything. Clarence had once run a secret relocation network. Yes. It had begun with good intentions, protecting whistleblowers, domestic violence survivors, even political refugees. Danielle had volunteered briefly, helping women like Marla escape. But then Clarence changed, became colder, more distant, more calculated. "I thought it was stress," Danielle said. "Then I realized he wasn't just changing identities. He was selling them, turning people into leverage, trading their safety for power." She'd confronted him, and he'd warned her, disappear or be disappeared. So she ran. "Mexico was a diversion," she said. "I left just enough noise in Tijuana for people to think I vanished there. But I was always moving, never more than a few weeks in one place, until I realized I couldn't run forever." Clara asked, the question that had haunted them all. "Why now? Why leave the breadcrumbs?" Danielle looked up, her gaze steady. "Because someone else took over, and he's cleaning house. People I helped are being found. Some quietly vanish again, others don't make the news." She handed Clara a flash drive. "Everything I've collected, names, dates, codes, even the last known base of operations for the person pretending to be Clarence." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Pretending?" Danielle nodded. "He's not the man I knew, not just in spirit, in face, in fingerprint. They replaced him, Clara, a full wipe, new skin, new life, maybe even with his own consent, maybe not." She paused, then added, "The Clarence you're chasing might not even be alive anymore." A long silence passed, then the sound of a branch snapping outside. All three froze. Danielle moved to a hidden panel beneath the floor, pulled out a satchel. "They're close. You'll have maybe 15 minutes. Clara stepped forward. "We're not leaving you." "You have to. If I go with you, they'll bury this, frame me, erase everything." "Then come in on your terms," Marcus said. "We'll go public." Danielle looked at them both. "You think justice is loud? It's not. It's what survives the noise." More branches snapped. A drone hummed in the distance. Danielle turned to Clara and pressed the scarf into her hand. "Find the woman with the green notebook. In D.C., she's the last one who knows how this all started." "What about you?" Clara asked. Danielle smiled faintly. I was never the story, I'm just the warning. She opened the back hatch in the wall and slipped into the forest. One last time. Clara and Marcus waited, holding their breath, until the cabin was stormed 10 minutes later by a group dressed like rangers but carrying silencers. She watched them tear the place apart. But by then Danielle was gone, again. 2 weeks later, in a sealed room in Washington, Clara opened the drive. It contained files on over 50 individuals, all believed to be disappeared, all proven to be reassigned by Clarence's network. Many were later killed under mysterious circumstances. And at the bottom, a note from Danielle. The truth won't set you free, but it will set fire to the cage. The red scarf now sits in Clara's drawer. Sometimes she wonders, not if Danielle is alive, but what she's burning down next.